Hey guys, Jay here. Welcome to another cosplay tutorial. Today, this isn't gonna fit on screen, really, but this is CID HIGHWING's spear from Final Fantasy VII, specifically Advent Children. There are a few things that I need to talk about. I'll wait till the end so that you can get straight on into the tutorial. But just know that for the materials, for the most part, you'll be able to find those in the description, as well as the template for this piece and the head. That will be that whole template will be on my website, which is also in the description, and it's a free download. Anyway, let's get on into the tutorial and I'll talk about the rest afterwards. Unlike basically every other tutorial on my channel, I do not start with tracing and cutting the pattern, but instead, this time I start by contact cementing two pieces of 6mm foam together. And just so I don't have to bring this up again, all of the gray, black, and red foam is a special kind called What the Foam that's much stronger than EVA foam. However, you don't have to use that, I just have a lot of it. You can use regular EVA foam if you want for everything. The white foam I use later actually is normal EVA foam. Also, every time I glue foam together, or just in general I don't specify what glue I'm using, just know that that means I'm using contact cement. Also, I should mention that when working with contact cement, please wear a respirator. Your lungs are going to thank you by not killing you. So, now is the time when I started using the template. I traced the main shape onto the now 12mm thick block of foam, and before doing so, I used my X-Acto knife on the pattern to cut out the corners of the inner line where the bevel starts. Because the bevels won't be made from this piece, but this makes it so I don't have to cut out an entire section of the pattern. Honestly, this would be a lot easier if you just print out two templates, which I didn't do, and just cut the bevel section off of one of them and trace that piece out. That would make it so you don't have to do this connect the dots thing that I'm doing. After it's all traced, I can then cut the piece out. And for me, I have to cut it out with multiple passes because this What the Foam is really dense, but normal foam shouldn't have nearly as bad of a problem. I also cut out two more of just the bottom section out of the 6mm stuff. And then I made two strips that match up with the two horizontal line sections of the pattern that have the rounded off ends. The rounded ends will be added in another way, and this is just really hard to show you, so I'm going to be switching to a microphone that's on the camera to tell you how to finish up this extremely detail heavy section. Alright, so I need to explain how I did these pieces. Because there's no way I can show you in tutorial, because even though I can get the camera close like this, I have to get really close and move my camera around a whole lot in order to show cutting out all the different pieces, gluing them all together, because it's not going to be just like right here doing all this stuff. It's going to be like moving it around so it won't work in a tutorial style. So I'm going to show you how I did it. I'm going to tell you how I did it and hope that you understand. So that's about as good as this is going to get. So to start, obviously, these are the pieces that are going to go on the blade piece, like so, at the base of the blade. Also, if you're hearing stuff outside, sorry, it's kind of loud out there. But anyway, so you can see there's a whole bunch of stuff added that wasn't there in the last little video clip thingy. I can't keep it focused on just this, so that's going to be annoying too. So I believe I mentioned how I got the two strips on here like this, and then these button things, I guess. They're supposed to be screw tops, but I don't really care. I'm just going to leave them like that. I might cut into them and make them look like screws, but I don't really care. But what I did with those, in case I didn't mention it, I have a hole drill here. This thing pokes holes, and then you can shoot the piece back out, and then that piece is what I put here. So that's how I made all of these. So there's these end pieces here. These are, again, I can't focus on it. These end pieces over here are actually angled. So what I did was I took a long piece of foam and I cut out a square and then cut that in half diagonally. It was really hard to do that. Use a really sharp knife, but be super careful with it. You'll get a better cut than I did. I got kind of jagged cuts, but it's okay. No one's really gonna see it. And then the same thing for these two center pieces here. It's just they're angled on two sides, and then they have a flat top. That's pretty easy. You just take the knife. I'll show you right here. You just take the knife, and here's a line. So you would angle it in, and then cut along that line, and then let's just go like over here and cut another line. And then once you cut those two pieces out, that didn't cut all the way through, but Once you cut those pieces out, it'll be angled like that. So it'll be that trapezoid shape or whatever. And then there's these 3 bumps here. They're not even at all. They're more even on this side, which is better. So I think this is gonna be the side we look at, the prettier side. So there's 3 things. I was trying to figure out how to do that. I was thinking maybe use like a dowel and cut angles into it and glue that down. I couldn't get that to work because it was just too hard to cut the dowel. So what I did in foam dowels will not work because they're not small enough. I originally thought these were going to be dowels when I was making the template. They are really small. So these are only like 1/4 of an inch, maybe less. So yeah, that's not gonna happen. And so this is the smallest foam dowel. It's like double the size. So ain't gonna happen. So I cut out that same thing that I just showed you cutting out, except I did both angled cuts along the same thing. So it made a triangle along the same line, just in different directions. So I made a triangle, and then I carefully used the Dremel to make it a little bit smaller because I made it a little too big. And then I cut it where when I cut the pieces off of it, I cut them at angles after measuring them on, like I would go, okay, this needs an angled tip because they go over these angles there, because there's obviously an angle on this side, an angle on this side, angle on this side, things like that. So I would cut the angle out, I would hold it up to it, figure out where I needed, and then go bam, and cut the angle off so that this was now able to fit. So that's what I did for all 6 of these pieces here, so that it looks continuous as much as I could anyway. It's not great, but again, I'm just gonna use this pretty side and see if it works. But that's how I did all of that. As I wait for other pieces I need to arrive, I move on to the blade. Now you can see that I cut off the bottom of the template. What I'm doing here is the same thing that I've done for many other blades, where I make the top layer out of cardboard and score lines in, which is just shallow cuts, along the bevel line and bend the cardboard in order to create a 3-dimensional blade edge look, without having to sand everything in. Also, since I'm folding the bevel sections, I need to cut darts, which are little triangle cuts on every corner, so they meet back up when it's bent. This doesn't need to be perfect, but don't make them too wide. You can see mine, just I guess try to copy mine. Then I cut out 2 pieces of 2mm regular EVA foam, because I'm going to use it to skin over the cardboard, so that it can look like a blade edge. Again, without having to sand anything, which is way easier, and less messy. After the glue sets, I then cut off the excess foam. However, I do this at an angle, with the knife tip pointed away from the piece. The angle that this gives me will make it look nicer when the 2 pieces are glued together, which I just do by using contact cement along the edge and just stick the 2 pieces together. Moving back over to that first piece I made, I now cut out the channel in the middle. However, I also just cut the bottom section off completely free from the top because the channel is actually larger than the section where they connect. But it's fine, because I take the sides of the bottom piece and glue them together with the 2 faces of that section to make the bottom a single piece with a large void in the middle for the wooden piece to fit through. I also added 4mm strips on the sides of those pieces that I just added so that everything lines up on the sides correctly. There's just one more thing I'm missing. Well, 4. The rounded ends on the sides. I used 10mm foam dowels and cut them in half down the length, so I had 2 half circle dowels. I think you can find them already cut at this size, but I just don't have any. I then cut them to the right length and glued them on. It's not perfect, but it'll have to do. The last foam detail I need is this little piece that's in the center of the blade. I think this is supposed to be in the movie what holds the head onto the spear, but I don't know. It looks like it's riveted on using this piece, so that's what I'm going with. Regardless, I made it with 2mm foam and used the hole drill again to make the same rivets and glued everything down with 1 on each side with having 2 rivets each. And now it was just time for the paint. I couldn't bring the camera out for this, but I used gray Plastidip, since it's all I had, on the foam pieces, as well as gray primer after that, as well as the gray primer on the wood. I did add furniture tacks to the section of the wood, which mimic rivet heads on the staff section, which can be seen between the top and middle wrappings, but I ended up needing more later on, so you can just leave these until the end. Anyway, continuing the painting, I then used a dark metallic color, I think iron or something, over everything. And then I masked off the center of the blade section so I could paint the bevel bright silver. I also forgot to paint the little middle section in the blade that I added at the last part, so I just used regular brush on silver for that. As well as you can see in this part of the video, like this whole time, I used silver to add weathering to the piece that sits just under the blade. It's not that great because none of this is flat, so it doesn't go on very well, and it's very subtle, but you can still kind of see it, so it's fine. And also I used a matte clear coat over everything. And there's only a few steps left, so now I move on to the wraps. I do this with white bias tape, but you can use whatever you want. This is just what I already had. It's actually a little thicker than what's on the actual spear, as well as I may have either put too much wrapping or too little wrapping, and I just went with what I thought personally looked good while I was doing it. This is also where you can figure out where those rivets go. If you don't want to use the tacks that I used, or you can't find them, you just need to cut circles out of 2mm foam and glue them on, and that'll work just fine. Just be careful if you use foam, because that can get damaged while handling that section of the staff where the tacks won't have that problem. If you use the tacks, you want the ones that have the plastic coating over the metal heads so that they can be painted. And we're going to go with black for these, which I explain at the end of the video. They're supposed to be the same color, but I explain why they're black now. Anyway, for the wraps, I just wrapped down, find a stopping point that I like, and then wrapped back up, and I used hot glue to tack everything down in every section. And then there's 3 sections. There's a top, the bottom, and then somewhere near the middle. And then there's 3 sections. There's the top near the head, the bottom near the pommel, and then the middle section is just closer to the bottom, so that it's just closer to the bottom instead of dead center. And the last detail I need to add is the bolts that pop out of the sides of that piece that's under the blade. These are just nylon bolts that I found on Amazon with a nylon hex nut that I found at the hardware store. I went with the nylon ones because they weigh next to nothing, whereas real bolts would be heavy and could even hurt somebody if you accidentally hit someone with this. These won't do that. They also stay glued in a lot better since they aren't weighed down. These are also painted with that dark metallic color that I mentioned earlier. As well as to glue them in, I used Gorilla Glue's version of 5-minute epoxy, and in fact that was the last of it, so I have to get more before I can glue the head onto the wood, and I just used this glue specifically because of how strong it is. Super glue or hot glue, or really anything else, won't hold these in anywhere near as good as this stuff. But other than that, that is all. Alright, so that's how you make CID HIGHWING's spear from Advent Children. But there's a couple things I need to talk about. So, this is actually very important. This, first off, is not the correct size. Obviously this is short. If you watched Advent Children, you'll notice that this thing is supposed to be like 3 times bigger than CID is. Not happening. Not only will that not fit in here, but cons aren't going to allow that. So I'm not going to do it. However, if you want to do that for like at your house or something, or just have something for display, that's totally fine. Just make this shaft longer. That's all you have to do. This head and stuff, the template is already scaled to be the correct size for if it was full size. I just shrunk the height down. So it's proportional to the right size. So don't worry about that. However, this shaft here, I don't know if you're going to be able to find it or not. Depends on your stores, your local stores, and what they have in stock. So what I used is what's called molding, like it goes on your walls on the bottom, right above the floor. If you look at any wall, at the very bottom, you'll see a separate piece of wood. That's molding. That's what this is. So this would go up against the wall like that, or around a door frame or window frame or something. And this one specifically is just the plainest you can get. It's just a plain rectangle, basically. It actually has one rounded corner here, which would be, it would go this way, so that this rounded corner would be the top. So this would be the exposed corner, and it would be the wall here, floor here. So you don't hurt yourself on it, because it wouldn't be a sharp edge. But it's not even noticeable when you're holding it. So it doesn't really even matter. You can sand down the other edges, but that's just time I don't want to waste and all that. So I'm not going to. But also, I don't know what you're going to find at your stores. So this one specifically is thickness 1/2 inch and width 1 inch. So that's what fits with my pattern. You can always go bigger or smaller and change the size of this if you want to. That's totally up to you. Also, you may have noticed, you can hear that this isn't actually glued down yet. I'm gonna do that later. That's just, I need more epoxy. I ran out, and I want to get this part done, and then I can epoxy everything together. This part's not either. So I don't even have to do this part. I just have to epoxy this down and it should be good. But I ran out, so I just gotta wait until I get more. But yeah, so I don't know which wood you're going to be able to find. But also, it's really hard to see them. But there's some furniture tacks in here. There's 6, so there's 12. There's 6 on each side. Mine are black, first off, because I had to paint them. I had 4 in there, because I thought I was gonna need, you know, less. I just messed up the measurements when I was putting everything together, when I was figuring out where everything was gonna go. So I ended up needing more after I'd already painted it, and I can't repaint it now that everything's on it. So I had to repaint those separately. And so we're just leaving them black because it's easier, instead of trying to match this color. This is for my friend Atlas, who cosplays with me all the time. And he said black works for him. I actually did gray on this side so that he had a choice, and he said black. So I'm just gonna keep this side black and then repaint this one black. But I have no idea where to find those. I got them at Lowe's as well, in the hardware section where the screws and stuff are. But they only had one when I went there. So I don't know how often they have them in stock or what kinds they have in stock. But these are flat, which is what I want, so they look like rivets. And these ones have a plastic coating on the top so that you can paint over them instead of being metal, because I didn't want them to be metal. So I can't find them anywhere. So I can only find metal ones. So if you can find them with the little coating on it, you can paint it. Or if you can find them in black or a color that you think will match your thing just fine, go ahead and just use those. Alternatively, you could, if you were to buy any of these, like I have, these hole drills here. They showed up in the tutorial. They were what I used to cut out all the little things on here, the little screw heads on here. So you could use that. They have a setting that should be just fine for this size, and just pop that out, or just cut a circle out yourself, or get a pipe that's the right size and sharpen it and cut that out. You know, there's millions of ways to do circles. So do any of those methods, or even hole punches or leather punches can do circles too. So do those, whatever you need to do, and just glue them on out of foam or something. That's possible too, because you can just use regular 2mm foam and call that good. So, and then just paint that. So if you want to do that, that's an alternative instead of the tacks. Also, these aren't glued in. They're just literally stuck in like you would put them in your wall. They're not going to fall out, so they're fine. But anyway, going on a little too long about this. It's getting really hot up here without that air conditioner on. So I got to get going. But yeah, so that's how you make Cid's spear from Advent Children. And if you like this tutorial, go ahead and hit that thumbs up, subscribe for more, and I'll see you guys later.